Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Tamin Inc., a full-service accessibility and technology practice. Tamin partners with organizations of all sizes to shift mindsets and empower people. Wherever you are on your inclusive journey, Tamin's team can help you with web accessibility assessments and accessible digital solutions. Tamin believes access to information is a human right, so head on over to tamininc.com and get more information. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I'm director of media productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and get more information. How you doing, Chad?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Cold, obviously, with the zip up for everyone listening. He just zipped up his jacket. I am, it's not too cold here. I mean, it's in the 60s, the low 60s right now. So we're not too bad.
Yeah, not too bad. It was like 19 degrees, early in the morning. But we've had some sunny days. So at least it's gotten like a little warmer, like in the 40s. But I'll tell you, I did a bike ride on Saturday and Sunday. But on Sunday, I headed out the door and I'm like, it is cold. It was like 32. It was like 32, yep. And when you're doing like 20 miles an hour and the wind's blowing on you, it's
wind chill
chilly,
factor,
man.
Shrinkage, baby, shrinkage. And are you wearing one of those skin suits too when you're out there biking?
Yeah.
Ooh,
and like tough. I have like winter gear, like it's insulated and stuff, but it's still
an 1/8 of an inch instead of a 1/16 of an inch.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
No worries. Awesome. Well, today we wanted to talk about WebAIM just released their 10th screen reader user results. And so we're going to talk about some of those findings from a document accessibility perspective. And I think, they are inclusive of all web, and we're going to look at some of these statistics and talk about mobile and browser and other things. But really we really want to focus on web accessibility and kind of what we can glean from this report. And I want to talk about, I posted this in our PDF accessibility Facebook group, and I got some interesting comments back. So I want to touch on those a bit. And if you're not aware, if you're a new listener to the podcast, we do have a PDF accessibility Facebook group with almost 4,500 members in it, which is great. And they're all focused on document accessibility. We don't allow any spamming, no asking for jobs or work. This is truly about supporting you in your accessibility journey and getting you the answers you need, and maybe letting you vent a little bit about some of those difficult situations, but mostly solutions, right?
Mostly positive, right?
Yes.
I mean, pretty much everything on there is of the positive nature. Every now and then somebody gets a little off track and we have to reel them in, and be like, hey, let's stick to the topic. But for the most part, everybody's really helpful and really just trying to solve problems that we all deal with. And It's funny, I forget about some of these problems, but then I'll go on the Facebook group and I'll read something that somebody posted. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. You know what I mean? There's a lot to remember. There's really a lot to remember.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to talk a little bit about this report before we get into it, right? Who does WebAIM survey? It's a survey, right? Now, typically in a scientific environment, you want a very large size of sample size so that you can get a relatively accurate reading. The sample size for WebAIM is 1,539 people. That's not a lot. So take what we say and what we see or hear in these stats with a grain of salt. Understand that this is the best we have. There isn't a worldwide survey somewhere that's got, tens of thousands of respondents. This is a survey they put out every year we were going to find out here in a second, but mostly blind people are the people who are responding in a very limited, very limited demographic. So while we can use these statistics to help gauge and guide us in what we understand is a user experience, just know that it is a relatively small sample size. But the demographic is pretty diverse, though, for the sample size that it is, right, Chad?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I want to point out, right, you brought up a good point, Dax. I mean, it's not like we have 10 of these reports that we can sift through, right? I mean,
right.
Pretty much WebAIM is the only organization doing this. So,
yeah.
As we go through this, we may have comments, maybe a criticism here or there, but it's in no way a dig towards WebAIM and what they do. We think what they do is they're doing great work, and just kind of understand we're looking at this objectively, and so we may have a criticism here or there, but honestly, I mean, this is good information for us to all be able to, glean some insight from.
Right. So talking about where people are from, Chad.
Yep. The statistics that we have here, the biggest group of people, right, that have been surveyed here are from North America, right? A close second, I would say. So that was 47% of the respondents.
Right.
30% are from Europe. Right. So that kind of makes sense that Europe is the second biggest, group of surveys. Then Asia is number 3 at 6%. Right. So keep in mind, North America and Europe makes up 78% of the survey respondents. And then Asia is about 6%. South America, 6%. Africa, Middle East is about 5%. Australia and Oceania is 3%. And then Central America and the Caribbean is about 1.3%. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, so I think it's nice that it's a pretty diverse population, I guess, is where we're going.
Yeah.
Even though it's a small sample size, it is diversely represented. And it shows that 37% are ages 21 to 40, 35.9% are 41 to 60. So really, the majority of the users are somewhere between 21 and 60. And then we have 20% are over 60 and 6.1% are below 20. Though what's interesting is in an era, in an age where digital cell phones are part of everyone's life, I would think that the people who are 20 and younger would be primarily using assistive technology on their phones and ingrained in the technical age. However, again, it goes back to who responded to the survey. And while it's, it is worth saying that not everyone was asked, I'm sure it was broadcast and there was a lot of effort to get people to respond. It's not saturating the market to get those responses. So the thing here, I guess, to glean from it is that it is really all ages. 21 to 60 is a pretty large age range, and 20% over 60 years of age and older, they're all using assistive technology, which is a good thing. It's not just a certain demographic of population. But one thing to note here, when I talk about this survey, the people who responded were overwhelmingly people who were blind, right? They're in the table that we're looking at here under disability types, 76.6% were people who were blind. 19.9% were people with low vision, 5.2% cognitive or learning, 6.8% deaf or hard of hearing, 2.2% motor, and 4.9% other. So again, take these statistics with that in mind, that this is really mostly about the point of view of blind and low vision users and in this environment. So yeah. So screen reader proficiency, Chad.
Yeah, this is a good one, right? Because I think we as remediators have a tendency to assume that everybody who uses a screen reader is an expert, right? They're super proficient, right? But in the respondents of this survey, 58% of the respondents consider themselves advanced screen reader users.
Right.
And then 36% considered themselves intermediate, and only 5% considered themselves beginner. Right.
Well,
And
what's interesting here is that we hear this all the time. In fact, we talked about this on a previous podcast. I had a client bake into the accessibility alt text of their document that says, JAWS users press the down arrow to navigate this document. And while a basic user who may not who has very little accessibility knowledge might say, yes, I'm using the down arrow, anyone who's intermediate or advanced would use a down arrow kind of at the last option. They're using a lot of the other shortcut keys like headings and T for tables and all the other things, right, Chad?
yeah, I mean, they're probably using the down arrow key once they get to the section that they're interested in reading, right?
You know, maybe a list of bullets, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, once they get to, you and I always say, like the easiest way to navigate a document using AT is by navigating the heading structure.
Right.
Because that tells you, okay, this is what this article is about. This is what this section's about. And once you're there, now you're like, oh, I want to know more. And that's when you may hit the down arrow key to read the paragraphs that follow that heading. Right.
Right. But you're going to press insert down arrow because that's going to read from that point forward, not down arrow. And the reason this is a problem for those of you who may not know is that in your tags, when you have a marked content object, that little banker's box that has a piece of text, and you press the down arrow, it reads the next one and it stops at that point. And many people are like, well, I want all those combined. So when I press the down arrow, it reads the entire paragraph or stanza or whatever it is. The problem is that's a lot of extra work for a very specific user experience that most people who are advanced or intermediate users are not ever going to use.
They don't want that, right? Because it's going to stop mid-paragraph, right? It's going to stop in the middle of the paragraph. So it really doesn't make sense. And you're absolutely right. I mean, using insert down arrow key, once you've gotten to the heading you want to read about, is just going to read from that point down. It's not going to interrupt you. It's not going to stop. It's just going to kind of keep going. So
right. Really good. And then let's talk about the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Which screen readers are people using the most? This is a drum roll every year, right? And this year we kind of flip-flopped. So last year it was NVDA was overpowering JAWS again. They kind of have gone back and forth. In fact, if we look at the line graph in the WebAIM report, we can see that in 2009, NVDA was almost non-existent and JAWS was top of the market. But then we get down to 2019. So over a 10 years period of time, JAWS slowly starts to go down and NVDA slowly starts to go up. And in fact, NVDA surpasses JAWS in August of 2019, where they're both, I think, 45, maybe 50, right under 50%, but relatively the same. JAWS rises in 2021 and outpaces NVDA, but then back down again in 2024.
Yeah, because now in January of 2024, they're almost meeting up again. And the usage is almost about the same. So JAWS has a little bit of a leg up on that, but really they're really around the same point.
Yeah, 41 to 38%, right? And here's what I believe. This is World According to Dax. Just take this for what it is. It's a small sample size. Yeah. If you were to sample everyone in lower income countries, you would find that probably overwhelmingly NVDA is going to be more popular. And in countries with more spendable, disposable income. That's the word I was looking for. More disposable income, like the United States, you're going to find JAWS is probably the higher. And in fact, if we go down to, let's see, where is it in this? I want to say it was in one of the paragraphs. It talks about, here it is. Primary usage varied greatly by region. JAWS usage was higher than NVDA in North America, 55 to 24%. In Australia, 45 to 37%, though JAWS usage was lower than NVDA in Europe, 30% to 37%. And then Africa and Middle East was overwhelmingly NVDA, 70% to 24%. And in Asia, again, 71% to 23%. So what do you find? The extrapolation I'm making here is when people care about the money they're spending and it's a huge impact, $100 a year for me and you, that's nothing. $100 for someone who only makes $600 or $700 a year or $1,000 a year, that's 10% of my yearly income. I'm probably not going to be, when there's a free alternative that works almost just as good, I'm going to pick the free alternative, right?
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of times when you or I need to demonstrate, the experience using somebody using AT, we tend to reach for NVDA just because I feel like we're potentially reaching a bigger audience, where it's relative, but it's funny how regardless of which one I open, it works pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I know JAWS does have some really nice extra features that are really helpful, but from a usage standpoint, they're pretty much the same,
Well, there are two major usages for JAWS that I really like. First of all, when I'm at a table, I can press Control-Alt and the number 5 on my keyboard, and it will read all headers associated with the cell I'm in. I get to hear exactly where I am.
I love that feature.
Yeah.
The
other one I like is being able to set a marker at a certain instance in a body of paragraph. So if I'm listening to something and I get to a link that's linked to a footnote, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get back because maybe they didn't remediate the document. Well, I could set a marker, hit the link, go to wherever I want, and then kind of like on a calculator, use memory recall to go back to that marker that I was in. And that's a pretty cool feature to have when you're mostly dealing with not perfectly remediated documents. So, there's a few other things that I really like about it. The elements list in JAWS lists everything. I can see all the links, all the graphics, all the headings, all the tables. I can get lists of every type of element in a document versus NVDA only gives you list of links and list of headings. And so it's a little bit more robust in that way. But what I found, what was interesting after talking with people at CSUN, is that a lot of native screen reader users who use JAWS don't really access, or NVDA, don't really access that elements list, which I thought was interesting. And maybe I just haven't talked to enough people yet, but I really like it. And it really helps me kind of browse through information. But apparently it's not so much of a thing in the community who are, using it on a day-to-day. So, interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful for like recalling information you've read, right? Like if you read the document, you read through it and you're like, oh, that's right. I remember there's a table that had this information.
Right.
That's where that list of elements could be super helpful. You just go table. I mean, you could use T as well to navigate through it that way, but yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that though, there is a bug, and I've reported it every single year when I go to CSUN, is that in the table, when it lists what the table is, it only just starts with the first few cells of the table in the data row. So instead of actually giving a label to the table, it just, whatever is in the A1, A2, A3, A4 is what gets populated into the description inside the elements list, rather than the heading that precedes the table, or maybe the table summary. Because what I'd love is for it to be the table summary, so that you could put in the table summary the title of the table and then the description of it, so that users of AT could then reference that in the elements list. But it's not how it works. So whatever.
Well, and I mean, also while we're dreaming here, right? I mean, like, it would be nice if, because, you and I have talked about this before, PDF UA says put the caption inside of the table as the first or last item.
Right.
But you and I know that it won't read it.
Right.
When you do nest it properly. But it would be cool if when you did a list of tables, if it displayed the caption for the table instead of those first couple of cells.
Well, and just to clarify, Chad, it actually does work for a table or a list, if you put the caption as the first child element or the last child element of a table, it does read it. Where it doesn't read it is on something that already has alt text. So you're supposed to do that if you have a figure. It should also go as the first child element,
Right.
but it won't read it as the child of a figure because the figure has alt text. And so NVDA and JAWS will skip the caption tag and just move on. So in a table, in a list, it will read the caption, but it doesn't identify it as a caption. It just identifies it as a paragraph. So you would hear table, and then you'll hear the table summary or the table caption. So yeah, I mean, it just needs to be a little bit clearer. So,
Yeah.
All right, let's going back to, we kind of got off on a tangent here, but let's go back to, the number of screen readers, again, between NVDA and JAWS is pretty even. And if you were, if I had to say which one's more popular, I would say they're both popular. And if you test with NVDA or JAWS, you're going to get you get a good user experience in either of those, you're going to hit the majority of people. Now, when we talk about browsers, right? Chrome is overwhelmingly the most used browser, 52.3%, 19.3% Microsoft Edge, which I find very interesting.
Me too.
I didn't think that would be the same. But here's what I do know, that most agencies who teach assistive technology teach the Microsoft platform. And so they would, because they have a curriculum that follows using Edge or and so therefore that's why they kind of start with that one as the base browser, right?
Well, and I've also seen a lot of companies, and I would say a lot of government agencies, default to the default browser on Windows, which is Edge. You used to be Internet Explorer, right? But now it's Microsoft Edge. So that probably helps to push that number up.
Sure.
But those users are kind of being forced to use it, right? That it's not really a preference. It's more of a, this is all I have at my disposal.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting to note is that a PDF inside a browser is far different than how a PDF reads inside your desktop platform. So if you're looking at a PDF in a browser window and it's not acting the way you expect it to act, headings aren't being announced, all text isn't, the reading order isn't set the right way, your form fields aren't tabbing the right way, it's most likely because you're in a browser environment. And why, Chad?
Well, because the browser is unable to render the contents of that PDF appropriately, right? It's like a barrier, right? It's funny. This past week, I had to send a PDF to a colleague. And she said, oh, well, I opened it, but everything is blank. None of your information is filled in. And I was like, wait a minute. I said, are you previewing it in your email program? She's like, yeah. I said, double click on it.
Right.
Open it in Acrobat or Reader. And she's like, oh my gosh, there it is. I'm like, yeah. So,
yeah.
But you know what? Like I had read, and I don't know where we are in this DAX, but I had read that Chrome is embracing the Adobe plugin to render PDFs in their browser.
Yes. Yeah.
So I have high hopes on that. I think
eventually it'll get fixed out.
Yeah. That could be really cool. I mean, it'd be great if you opened a PDF in Chrome and you could actually read, if it could, I don't know what the term is, but, like penetrate the shell of the PDF and actually see the tag structure. That could be really great.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely, guys, when you're testing your documents using a screen reader, you should be testing them in Acrobat because the experience inside a browser is just not going to be the same.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We recently had a customer DAX where she's like, I'm trying to read the document, but every time I read something, it says blank or it was saying, and I was baffled. I'm like, how could this possibly be? Because I think I sent her the file. And she's like, yeah, when I read it with NVDA, it's coming up as blank. And she did a screen share and she was opening it in her web browser. And I'm like, oh, I can't believe I didn't remember, that could have been a possibility. But
And then when we're looking here at the operating system pie chart that shows overwhelmingly 86% of screen reader users in the survey are using Windows. 9.6% are on a Mac. And then it trickles down Linux at 2.9 and other. I don't even know what other would be 1.4. Windows 3.1.
I mean, I guess Unix maybe. I don't know, but yeah, they're very low. I mean, Linux is 2.9%. So
right.
I think that's even high. That's 44 respondents are using Linux. I mean,
well, because they're just tired of getting browser inconsistency. So they're like, I'm going to be in control. But I would bet most of those people are programmers, right, in their own right. So
because I don't have any friends running Linux. Right. I
have like
Chad,
one.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, but what's interesting about this is that from a remediator standpoint, the majority of people, and this is the comment that got brought up in the Facebook group, was that the majority of people that are reading the documents might be Windows, but the majority of people designing the documents are probably on a Mac platform, right? And so, we got some of respondents who said, how many is missing or needing the proper tool on a Mac. So they're like, look, I would use Mac if I could because it's my platform, but since I don't have a tool that reads it correctly, I'm going to use Windows. Well, yeah, okay, but in the end, what we need to glean from this report is that our end users are on Windows. And so when you're testing for NVDA, yes, 10% of people are listening to their documents or their content on a Mac. And we both have said many times, on a mobile phone, the iPhone is a great user experience. It's just when you get into the desktop version and you're trying to look at a PDF versus browsing is probably just fine as well. But in Acrobat, there's just it's that barrier, right? And this goes back to the old Flash days where Adobe and Apple have just kind of said, no, we're not playing nice with each other. And it's just the way it is. So it's kind of one of the common questions we get when people start remediating is, okay, I'm on a Mac. How do I test my document now to know it's compliant? And the answer we give them is not very, very, it's never very welcomed because, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, it's not that we're without options, right? I mean, that there certainly are options. And one very simple option is, even if you're working with a group of people, grab a Windows machine and put it in amongst your group. And when you got to test it, open it up on that machine, right? I mean, that's one easy solution, I mean, the percentage of time that you spend testing the document is really negligible compared to the amount of time remediating or designing or, whatever it might be. So, the people who get hung up on this, I think they just need to open their eyes a little bit more because, it's really not as devastating as it may seem. And then as I said in one of the previous podcasts, even on the new Macs, you can run parallels and run those Windows applications. I mean, I do it. I'm the token Mac guy, in the remediation space that actually does this. And for me, it works. I have no issues. It works great.
Sure.
So,
sure.
It can
it's
be done.
It's just always when we say, well, here's what you have to do. And they're like, really? I can't believe that. And the answer is yes. And here's the statistic to show that 86% of people out there are digesting it in a Windows environment. And the common look is not available for Mac, right? Mm-hmm. Now, Exeo's made to tag is Mac and PC, but that's inside the source program for Adobe InDesign. And then there are several of the other remediation programs.
Access 4, right? All Windows based. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So it is problematic. So, The last one I guess we want to talk about here is the reason for why people use one versus the other. And the overwhelming response here, well, I don't know if overwhelming, 45.8%, they say they use the program they use because the existing comfort and expertise. I'm familiar with it. I already know how to use it. And therefore, that's why I'm using it. 26.55% say it's because of the features. So I got to think that 26.5% are JAWS users saying, look, I use JAWS because it's got some better stuff in it. And that's why, right? And then 11.7, 100%. And 11.7% say that they use it because of the availability. And NVDA users, it's free. Why would I not use a free program? For me, I'm using the free one until I find a barrier. It either makes me work harder or I can't access something, then I'm going to switch over. So, yeah. So I think that, it's really, there's really good insights today for this podcast, Chad. I think that the takeaway here for everyone is that you should be using NVDA or JAWS to test your documents. Realize that while we want access for everyone, because someone asked me this the other day, they said, well, Dax, does that mean we don't care about Apple users or, people who are using iDevices? No, it just means that there are limits to what the operating system can test for. If I test my document only in Apple VoiceOver and I'm trying to fix things, I'm going to run into barriers where there's no fix. No matter what I do, it won't fix the experience I get in Apple VoiceOver. Alternatively, if I just were listening to it in NVDA or JAWS, I'm going to be just fine and everything's going to have a good user experience. So the answer is, of course, we want to remediate for as many platforms as possible, but just realize, just like there are barriers in Word and InDesign and PowerPoint and all those other programs, there are also barriers in the operating systems and the screen readers that we're using in conjunction with the programs. So,
yeah, we try to address as many issues as we possibly can, but there are points where you're just not going to hit all of them. You're not going to get it 100%. So we try really hard, but sometimes it's tough.
Yeah. Well, if you want a copy of this report or you want to go look at it, go to webaim.org, webaim.org/projects. Then you can see the screen reader survey number 10. So webaim.org/projects. And then you'll see the screen reader survey number 10 in that as a link.
All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. Once again, today's podcast is sponsored by Tamin Inc. Tamin is a full-service accessibility and technology practice, and they partner with organizations of all sizes to shift mindsets and empower people. Wherever you are on your inclusive journey, Tamin's team can help you with web accessibility assessments and accessible digital solutions. Tamin believes access to information is a human right, so head on over to tamininc.com to get more information. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.